How do we do this? Like a three, two,
Three,
one?
two, and we can just maybe I'll put this part in first because I like the candid BS. No, yeah, just whenever you're ready.
Okay. Let me just make sure my hair looks good.
That part's going in.
Yeah. Let me just powder my face a little bit. Okay. Um, three, two, one. Welcome to the Evoke podcast. I'm Alex Balashov, and I'm guest writing today as road captain. We're going to do something a little bit different. I'm one of Brendan's Cat 4 athletes, so as you might guess, Brendan and I don't have a lot of Pro 1 podiums in common, and maybe not many podiums at all. But something we do have in common is I also quit my job. Well, actually, I got fired, not like laid off, like fired. But that's a story for another day. And to be clear, Brendan didn't, and bootstrapped my own business. It was during the Great Recession, actually, which was a great time to start a business. Of course,
That's
I
what they
totally
say. Build
knew that.
when things are down.
Yeah, that's what I told myself at the time. So my business is software work for the telecom industry. But as different as businesses are, some things are pretty universal about all businesses and apply to virtually all kinds of businesses. Pricing, scaling challenges, management challenges, marketing, workflows, you name it. And some of you probably know this, but the actual kind of the substance of what the business sells is probably like 20% of the work, and the rest of it is other overhead and cruft. And that's what that's where a lot of the bond of people who bootstrap businesses comes from. So Evoke is a digital business. It's like mine, which is one of those things that it's either too obvious or not obvious enough. Much of what goes in and out of Evoke happens digitally. It happens over the internet, which, like a lot of other businesses of that type, gives it some interesting qualities. And certainly it's a new kind of business model. I mean, 20 years ago, you couldn't analyze people's power files over the internet from a bunch of telemetry and sensors. So I think it's fair to say this podcast probably usually steers clear of the topic of money. You may have noticed Brendan kind of often goes out of his way to make sure the audience doesn't construe some sentence or some turn of phrase as pushing paid coaching services, which is totally understandable. I mean, nobody wants to appear sleazy or mercenary, and everybody understands that content is a vehicle for marketing, but like in the broadest, most cosmological way, not like I'm here to sell you things. But coaches do have to make a living, and Evoke is a commercial venture that has to support itself, and nothing is free, everything costs. So that's why I think on this episode of the Evoke podcast, we're going to pull back the curtain for you guys a little bit and get out of the no money talk comfort zone in which we comfortably languish in this bike bubble. And, we're not going to get into specific revenue figures or, things like that. That would really miss the point of the conversation. That's not what this is about. What we want to talk about is the business of coaching.
I like it. I appreciate you bringing this topic to the forefront.
Yeah.
And, it's funny that you say a no money talk comfort zone. I once had somebody say, well, you must be getting into coaching to not make any money. And I was like, no, not really. And they're like, well, you can't make money in the bike industry. And I was like, that's just not true. There's plenty of people making money. And that's the one thing about coaching that steered me away from this for so long, was I had been repetitively told, or I was mishearing the nugget of knowledge, like you can't make a living coaching. But then I look up towards guys like Hunter Allen, Frank Overton. Those guys are clearly doing it. And that's kind of one thing. I'm jumping the gun here, but it really kind of got some wheels spinning of, okay, what are these guys doing? How are they doing it? Let's actually break this down. So yeah, thanks for asking me on or coming on or however we want to do this, but being road captain today, this is nice. I just get to answer questions instead of asking them.
Yeah, I kind of enjoy that role myself. But I guess the tables have turned a little bit. So that actually is a good segue to what's the entrepreneurial side of the history. I think I can tell you just a little bit about myself. Before I went out on my own with my hands sort of being forced by being fired and having to choose between either looking for my seventh job in 3.5 years or going out on my own like I'd been wanting to for a long time. I had been trying to do various side hustles and side projects and get things going organically alongside the day job, as many people in our position have. And at least in my case with my work, what I found is, it's impossible. I was too burnt out. There simply are not enough hours in the day. My day job was too consuming, not just in terms of the raw workload, but mentally, physically, and so on. So it wasn't until I went into it full time and just took the plunge that I was really able to get going.
Was your side hustle at that point what became your job, or was it
Well, it
in the
was,
same field?
yeah, it was definitely in the same
Okay.
field. There are various, early stage experiments with things that ultimately went in a different direction, because as you do that rapid discovery and figure out how to pay the bills next month, obviously you pivot a lot.
Right.
But yes, it was the same kind of thing.
Cool.
But in your case, from what I remember, you went into coaching full time in 2018 or 19 or something like that.
19 was full on. Yeah.
But you had been coaching people for probably most of the last decade before that. So how did that work?
Yeah. So I started coaching people pretty soon after I started racing, actually. So I started I was doing some local like club racing. I hadn't done a USAC event in 2008. 2009, really started racing, was getting coached by Jason Hillemeyer. At that time, I was coaching CYO basketball in my parish. And as you get more into cycling, you realize, wow, these weekend hours are when everyone's doing everything. Group rides, big rides. That's what I really wanted to do. There was a group that would leave every morning at like 8 a.m., I think. And of course, the CYO basketball game was going to be at like 10:15. It was at 9. And I was like, man, this really sucks. So I eventually parted ways with that and was talking to my coach. I'm like, man, I miss like engaging with athletes. When do you think I could start coaching? And I think I was a Cat 1 by then. He said, you should start coaching now. And I said, I don't know anything about this. He's like, well, talk to some of your friends who know less than you. And he's like, man, you have so much experience already in just a couple of years. Just start funneling information down to them and charge them $50 only so that they have skin in the game. So they like respect you a little bit as a coach. There's like a dynamic there. And I was like, cool. So I started coaching people and had always maybe had 3 to 5 athletes, just people that knew me, that reached out to me, that heard, hey, would you help me get faster? And sometimes it wasn't even like a coach. It was just that, help me get faster. I'm like, cool. That's how it sort of started way before full time.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you talk about that downhill dynamic. I mean, as much as I don't know much about formal training, there are some new cyclists compared to whom I know a great deal. So, in an informal capacity, certainly I've been an advisor to them and found that, it's really there. At first, it felt kind of like it felt a little pretentious, like what do I even know? But then I realized that just in terms of giving them a few basic tips that are self-evident to all of us, I was able to put them on a much better path. And I think that's probably how you get started, is you take your place in kind of socializing the knowledge downward and diffusing it.
100%. I think just looking at it as like you're a mentor, you're a big brother, and no big brother knows everything, but they've got some experience, and listen to what they have to say. And until someone is a parent or a grandparent and has a ton of experience and has been through a lot of different things, like I think just listen to a lot of big brothers. And yeah, it's a great way to get
Yeah.
started.
And I certainly had those. But charging a few people $50 here and there is obviously not going to take you very far in terms of making this a so-called gainful endeavor. So what did the arc of that look like between, say, the early 2010s and when you went out full time? Did it slowly increase until you could sustain yourself, or was there like a watershed moment or a big break or a huge stair step?
Yeah, it was. So when I moved to Nashville in 2016, I was coaching with 2 other people, one of them being Patrick Wally. And it got to a point where I was still doing the medical device thing. And I remember being in the hospital one day thinking, man, I have too many athletes to take care of right now. And I think I had seven or 8 guys, which doesn't sound like a lot, but ask any new coach, you go from like 5 to 10, and it seems like a whole new world. People have no idea when they hear I coach 20 people, they're like, how do you coach 20 people and do all this other stuff? Well, I have crazy organized systems by now that makes me
Yeah.
able to do it much
Well,
faster.
I was going to say you've devised processes, workflows, templates, and
100%.
routines around it. And without that, there's no way you could do it.
Yeah. So at that point in time, I was doing the medical device thing, and I moved to Memphis, and I was getting really burnt out. I mean, I sold medical devices for I think 13 years before I called it quits. And I was walking into a hospital in Arkansas to go argue with this purchasing manager. And I remember walking out and just thinking, this sucks. I really don't like this anymore. And the game had changed a lot. The spine industry had changed a lot. Personal goals, my roadmap that I had kind of set out for myself when I went out on my own, probably 6 years before that as a distributor, were not coming to fruition. I didn't know if they'd be achievable because of, without getting in the depths of the medical device industry, I just didn't see it growing to what I wanted it to become. So I drove back from Arkansas to Memphis, and I just kept thinking, well, what the hell am I going to do if I don't do this? And the other option really would be going to a more corporate role. That definitely would mean less racing, less riding. And when I got back, I was talking to my not yet husband, Chris, and he said, well, people always say, why don't you just do the coaching full time? And I said, well, it's not a real business. You can't make a living off of that. And then people would always kindly point out there's a few people that are really doing it and growing something. And so I started thinking, what would I have to do? And so I had called up Patrick, and I said, I exactly remember sitting somewhere in the house. I said, how do we get people in Oregon to hear about us? And as you know, start up an actual brand that wants to put out content and wants to help other cyclists. And so I eventually decided to break off from the group that I was with, just because I felt in order to go hard at this and make enough money to make this happen and hit enough people out there with content and create blogs and videos and podcasts, there wasn't going to be able to be this, hey, there's 3 of us, everyone has to okay every piece of content that goes out the door. And that's what somebody else wanted. And I was like, I think I'm going to go do my own thing. Patrick was really down with the idea. We created EVOQ, and in 2019, I shut down my medical device business. It felt extremely freeing, and I remember thinking, okay, I'm going to give myself 6 months to make, I think I said, like, I got to make 50 grand to make me feel like, okay, this is working. Because also personally, like, I wasn't married to Chris. We were living in Memphis together. It's a weird vibe for me, but like someone who's just very independent, being like, hey, I think I'm going to leave this medical device thing and just go into coaching. And he was like, you should totally do that. And I was like, what? And he's like, you hate your job. You're miserable at it. Like,
yeah. And I mean, yeah, it sounds like, I mean, that was probably going to involve a short-term dip and
100%.
maybe a change of the economic dynamic between you two. And
yeah, so I think that was my number of like, okay, you can live on 50K and not be sweating. I'll just have to like trim the fat on some things, and that'll be my benchmark. And then the next, and like, okay, where do we go from there? So that's really kind of how it started. And then putting out the content was crazy. Like, it just, I would wake up to an email from someone in Russia that's like, yo, I found your blog, da, da, da. I'm like, this is nuts. Somebody in Russia found us. And then it was like some guy in Texas, and then some guy here, and then people's word of mouth. And then it just started flowing.
And it's so exciting in those early days too, where now it's like, oh my God, another email. No, I mean, I know.
I try, you know what? It's so funny that you say that. I'm extremely humbled and appreciative that somebody would actually give a SHIT about what I have to say about cycling. So I remind myself of that, because when there's super busy days and you're like, who is this Joey Pants from wherever? I want to remember when I was thinking, God, I hope someone emails me today. Like, I'm going to take the minute, 2 minutes, whatever it is, and digest and talk to them. And the great thing is now about where we're at, though, if somebody comes in with a crazy scenario, I'm like, yo, coach, somebody else who has more time and looking for more athletes, this is a great person for you to talk to, build this relationship. Because that's all I want to be able to do with that type of stuff, is build relationships with athletes that are looking for help. I was so fortunate to have so many mentors in upstate New York telling me how to get better, how to approach training, what to do at races. And I understand that there's a lot of people in cities with no one else around them, and they're looking at, okay, what forum do I trust? And hey, I don't give out all great information. I'm sure someone listens to some stuff and says, this guy's a freaking idiot. But from the number of people I talk to, I think I have a pretty sound base that's not extreme in any manner. And I've read some things in blogs or excuse me, forums, and I'm just thinking like, man, I hope this person checks this other person's credentials, because it's like the blind leading the blind sometimes. But we're all just excited about cycling and trying to share knowledge. And I'm not saying by any means it's not that I don't give. I'm sure I give bad information to somebody, and so anyways, that's kind of that's the late 2000s into 2022 kind of where we're at now. And I feel like we're just getting started, to be honest with you.
Yeah, you've said that. You certainly started your business in a more intelligent manner than I did. I just kind of got fired. I had 2 mortgages due next week and like a car payment. And I was like, well, let's see how we can figure out how to make money. And the thing is, before I was trying to build products and really focus on kind of a scalable business model as a side hustle, but I had this much bandwidth for it. So suddenly I found myself on my own, and liquidity became the concern. I need to pay the bills. And unfortunately, that doesn't really leave you a lot of room to solve the intellectual problem of a business model, actually creating reusable workflows and processes that can be scaled up and replicated at decreasing marginal cost. And most importantly, involve plugging in other people you can actually afford to build and grow it.
Yeah.
So it turns out
that definitely took for us, sorry to cut you off, that definitely happened like later down the line of realizing,
sure.
I think, I'm trying to remember now, Craig came on as the 3rd coach. And so I was going through things with him. And then it was like Josh came on. And then by the time, or maybe it was Alex came on, whatever, by the time it was the 4th or 5th guy, I was like, wait, we need to document this stuff so we're not
but at the same time, but let me point out that at the same time, from the very beginning, you were thinking about content, scalability, discoverability, how to make money at this. Not just flailing around, thrashing around, trying to pay the bills. Whereas, like, I think back to my first year, I think about the things I was willing to do for money, some of which are not repeatable in a public forum. Like, I remember dealing servers out of the back of my car at some point, which is something that, nobody in my profession would stoop to. I did a lot of stuff. And the thing is, it was all a means to an end in my mind. But unfortunately, it turns out that building a business model that's around all the things that Alex can do does not a business model make. That's just basically a job for Alex. And that's a problem that I'm still struggling with, even though obviously 14 years later, things have matured and professionalized in some respects, much as in your business. But the fact that you were thinking from the very get-go, like, how do I grow this into something substantial, reflects an acumen that a lot of small bootstrapped business people that start out as a army of one don't necessarily have. And kudos to you for realizing that's important. I think the fact that you went out before and tried to be a distributor and this and that probably helped inform your sense of how money works in general. But I think that's great.
Yeah, I think also just I try not to put pressure on myself, because that was one of the biggest mistakes I made in medical device sales. When I started, I was really young, selling to neurosurgeons, didn't understand how that game worked, didn't understand how to be an effective sales rep. And that's part of, I'm really I think our approach is pretty casual, and I don't mean in like lackadaisical, but we're not selly. And that's the number one thing from like the power file analysis. People say, I can't believe you guys do this for free. And I couldn't
believe you did it for free.
But it builds
so
trust.
Helpful.
It builds another connection with somebody. And I think that's really crucial to building a business.
It's a great vehicle for the marketing of coaching, because what a good power file analysis helps you realize is how much you don't know and how much you have to learn from these guys. Not just, I got some free help. That's really missing the forest for the trees.
And I think some of the best work that people will ever do in starting up their career or business is the free work that you do. And I had, a surgeon that I was going after for a while, and was in his OR one day all day. And the nurse said, and I was there with basically my competition and just learning from this guy. And the nurse said, "You're not making any money today, are you?" I said, "No, not today." And they're like, "I can't believe you're here for 8 hours. This guy's totally going to like give you kudos for that." And I'm thinking down the road, I want to get this guy's business. Who cares if you put in an hour? So for me to spend, or one of the other coaches to spend 30, 45, 60 minutes to help someone see the big picture and point them in the right direction. Of course, there's some bad apples that ghost you, don't respond, that really ruffle my feathers. I'm like, wow, people actually, that's their persona. That's disappointing. 95% of people are very thankful, really appreciate it. And I think that's the best. We don't run ads. I think that's the best marketing. I'd rather somebody be like, hey, those guys actually went out of their way to try to help me. There was no stiff shake at the end for the business. If I decide to get a coach down the road, I'm definitely calling them back. And that's what I hope all the coaches would honestly say they want to embody, trying to leave something behind from a coaching aspect towards cycling, because so many people have helped me that I think I'm just trying to take that and, like you said, scale it more to help more people, because I think, the internet's an amazing thing. Why not use it? And
well, and from a practical, from a marketing perspective, it is a shrewd strategy, not only because you're building goodwill with a large base of people, not all of whom will convert to paid coaching, obviously, maybe a majority won't, but you're planting those seeds of goodwill, but you're also exposing them to the idea of what coaching even is and the kinds of things that a coach can tell you. Because I can tell you, before I started working with you, I didn't really know exactly what a coach would do. And like 16-minute video you sent me looking at my power file really illuminated for me like what kind of thing this is. And that was a very, very key engagement point. That's where the pedal hit the metal in terms of making me realize what this is, what we're actually doing here if you get a coach. Because I didn't really know how it worked.
I just had a Zoom with an athlete, and he had said, he goes, man, one of my friends said, dude, you're still paying that guy for workouts? And he just started laughing. He's like, it's so much more than workouts. Yeah. And that's the thing. A lot of people don't understand what the coaching relationship is. And a lot of people have had cut and paste bad coaches, which is, I don't find as prevalent as maybe 5 years ago. I know it's still out there. We definitely see it in some power file analyses, which is disappointing. The way I approach that is, hey, I'm not here to talk bad about anyone, but my question to you as the athlete is, do you find it a little funny that these same 2 to 3 weeks have been repeated over the past 3 months? And it's very interesting to hear what athletes say. So yeah, it's unfortunate that that's out there, but just try and help them move onward from that.
Sure. Well, just to move this along a little bit, the other big question that goes with this that I had was, in terms of getting together with other coaches, finding other coaches. I mean, I think you started out with Patrick and maybe some other person. This was just somebody you knew from racing, and just obviously you build a very broad social network, especially if you cat up that fast, because people are like, wow, who's this guy? But you've also talked about the peculiarities of local versus regional versus big races and so on. And you obviously made enough of an appearance there that over time you got to kind of cast your net pretty wide. But I think there's a difference between knowing lots of people who ride a bicycle and are good at racing, and people who really have the depth to coach, maybe with a little bit of coaching about how to coach, but also the inclination and the temperament to do it. And for that matter, how do you even have those types of conversations, right? Like, you're probably going to be standing around analyzing the race at the parking lot for 30 minutes, but you're not going to say, oh, and hey, by the way, you want to be a coach. So tell me a little bit about how those relationships can gel. How do you end up finding new coaches? How does that meeting of the minds happen?
So for the most part, if someone's extremely new to coaching and wants to get into coaching, they're probably not a great fit for us right now, just because of where I believe our coaches stand on the totem pole of experienced versus new coaches. And that's not to say anything bad about new coaches. They just have a lot to learn, and we're charging a fee that is not, I wouldn't feel comfortable sending some
not entry level.
Yeah, it's not necessarily for an entry level coach. I think a great thing is if somebody has a few athletes, even if if you've proven that you even have 3 people that want to pay you money to get faster, you're way ahead of the guy who's thinking, hey, I think I might want to get into coaching. There's so much more to,
with $0 of revenue attached to that.
And also idea. Just you've never, hey, what's your plan of looking through calendars? How do you do that? When do you reach out to athletes? How do you communicate to athletes? How do you collect fees from athletes? How often do you create content? What's your relationship with this? They're like talking to them about their business. They don't have a business yet. So they're just, they're a little too early. It's like when you're on Shark Tank, like You have a great idea. You're just a little early. So most coaches, I'd want them to be coaching for a little while, have some athletes that have been with them. I don't do like a background check with their athletes because if you send me a name, obviously the athlete's going to be like, yeah, this guy's great. Um, a great litmus test for me is what I actually want this person to coach myself. Everyone in EVOQ right now, I have no, Landry is my coach now. Any other coach, I would be happy and excited about having coach me, and I'd have full faith in what they have to say and their input. And a lot of that comes from just the relationships I've built with these guys over the time that they've been on board. And at the same time, I also believe in hire fast and fire faster. If somebody seems good and we get rolling, and either if athletes aren't happy with them, or because even though I don't coach everyone, I hear from a lot of athletes. Definitely if there's a problem, I get an email and I try to make that known. Like if you aren't happy with EVOQ, I want to hear about that. And it's one thing I try to hone in, or I don't want to say drive home, but I want my athletes to know communication is so important. And that crushes me when if an athlete leaves and they feel like they haven't been heard. That's a horrible feeling because I'm an athlete too, and that's what I think sets us apart from some other coaches. We're out there, we're all getting coached by people, we're all banging out these workouts. If someone's not listening to me, man, the coach is the person in your corner. That's like whether you have a good workout or a bad workout, you're supposed to be able to communicate with this person somehow. So communication is key. And so really, I think it's just, that's sort of how, and people find us. A few of the coaches had reached out to me and said, hey, I love what you guys are doing. If you're ever looking for more people, please keep me in the loop. And I want people that want to be here. And I think the way we all come together is really good for everybody involved.
Well, let me just hold on the first part of the question a little bit, though. So you talked about the criteria for kind of who you think might be a good fit and what you do if that turns out not to be the case. But I'm really curious, how do you expand beyond the first degree of removal in your social network to where, or maybe you don't, but how do you actually have this conversation about, do you want to work with my coaching group? How do those conversations?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which testifies to the strength of your brand as well, and just the overall edge of your content, to the fact that where they want to reach out to you. As someone who has hired, half a dozen employees over the course of his business in various facets, they're all pretty entry level, but as someone who has done that, I can appreciate how hard it is. I know this isn't an employment relationship exactly, and we'll get to that, but I can appreciate how hard it is to get somebody to want to work for you.
Well, see, that's the thing. Like these guys, they're very independent. And I know you had mentioned talking about the money side of things. I want to help them. Part of EVOQ for coaches, I want to help them grow their business. And it's one thing that I've consistently tell the coaches. Some people ask me, hey, why don't you let the other coaches on the microphone for the podcast? I said, whoa, buddy. I have told everyone from day one, make a podcast. Like I try to get other people to make content. People don't understand how long this stuff takes to put together. Like they think that everything just pops up out of thin air, whether it's the video, the blog. It is a lot of time from a lot of people to just make our small scale thing going. We don't have a huge media team pumping all this out. And so you're going to see more stuff from the other coaches because they're kind of hearing it. But I want them to understand they're part of EVOQ, but they're also, Landry is Landry Bobo, cycling coach at EVOQ, but it's still, he has his own following and he has his way of coaching. And so I kind of want to, they're definitely not my employees, but I want to do everything I can to try and lift them up and use the platform that we've created. And that's the one benefit of, being a part of our group is we do have a really good platform of, I think it's like 250,000 people come to the website in a year. And for me, I'm like, damn, that's sure very small compared to like Training Peaks or Trainer Road. But for Joey, the coach on his own, it takes a while to create that. And so I'm just excited that there are people that are going to be able to make a living from doing something they love and helping other cyclists. And so it's, that part does feel good. I definitely want to I want to have more coaches because we make coaches successful at what they do.
Well, and the fact that you've devised some kind of factory that helps them become more successful is maybe the most significant accomplishment here. So talking about that, since they're not directly employed by Evoke, of course, that there's a variety of compensation arrangements that various kinds of professional associations or partnerships of various kinds have. I mean, if you don't mind peeling back the curtain a little bit on yours, what I would normally assume is that they probably keep either a high percentage of their fees, maybe minus a small house fee, or maybe it's some kind of quota based structure or something like that.
Yeah, so they will keep exactly like you said, most of the coaching fee that they bring in. I've actually capped on a number as like the max that they will give back to Evoke each month because I'll pay for email accounts, website, training peaks, premium accounts, all those little things that's like, oh man, $50 here, 50 if you're a single coach. When there's now 8 of us, that number balloons a little bit more.
Paying but the costs also scale better, I'm sure. Or is it pretty linear?
It depends on what coaching software you use, but it's pretty linear. Like Google, it's interesting. Like you add a new email account, it goes up by $6. And so over time, the more athletes you coach, the less you give back as a percentage. And I would actually say it's probably the lowest percentage in the industry. I asked some of the other coaches, hey, have you ever looked around? And they're like, we should probably be paying you more. But that being said, I put out a video to these guys. There's only a fixed number of athletes that you can coach, right? And so how do you coach more level 1 athletes? Do you coach more level 3 athletes or level 5 athletes? But a level 5 athlete, you're doing 2 Zooms a month. So like, it's like the time commitment to each athlete is very different. And so I put out a video to them how to make 100K coaching after paying Evoke and doing all this and having a reasonable amount of athletes, because that's sort of like a US number. Like, hey, you make 100K, you're doing all right out there.
Sure.
So a lot of people think that is not even possible coaching. And so I put together a spreadsheet of like 5 different scenarios. Hey, if you're really heavy in this way, this is what you're going to make. If you're really heavy in this way, and so just to try and help educate them of like what they should be looking for as a coach. And, it's interesting. Initially, people listening are probably, well, there's probably the most lowest tier people. With our customer, there's not. Most people are level 2 and 3 athletes because of I feel like the reason is the content that we've put out. People realize that this is a more premium product than just paying for a schlepped plan. And we have a lot of just really smart athletes that are dedicated to their craft of cycling. And I remember being at the Training Peaks Coaching Summit, and they had asked me if I wanted to get into their program. I said, well, how long do your athletes usually stay for? And without pause, 8 to 9 months. 8 to 9 months is a pretty short coaching relationship. It's like someone came on for a season and then they're gone. Listen to Jim Miller, the head of performance at USA Cycling, or one of the guys on Velo News, and they're saying like you need 2 years to make a difference in an athlete because you got to like change the bad habits and then get them going on the right course. It is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, sub 1 year seems like really high churn.
Really high, but that's normal. And that's why a lot of people don't get into this business, because athletes leave after race season, which blows my mind. Because I have the conversation with all my athletes, I shouldn't say all, a massive portion of gains is in the quote unquote off season. I don't even call it the off season anymore because it's not the off season. You have race season and then you have a training season, or we used to call it the power phase. Get your butt in the gym, start doing some other work that's going to be applicable to cycling. But
yeah, I think you had a short reel where you said if you're treating it as an actual off season, you're off the back. And
did I say that? That sounds aggressive, but I'm
that sounds like something
in the weight rooms. I'm getting like all like broed out. Yeah, I'm like, you're off the back, bro.
I think it was in Florida in the condo or something, but it was.
But it's true. If you're not training and putting in your highest volume when it's the off season, you're missing out. And I'm not saying you don't want to put in a high volume during race season. But your highest volume, because you're riding a ton of endurance, turning yourself into an aerobic freak, which is good for cycling, then there's no time for it to be the off season. And
Yeah,
I'm
you
NF1,
and
man. That used to be party season. That was the
oh, I
worst.
know.
Yeah, it's
But
the worst
but
waste of time.
realizing I mean, without getting into the weeds, realizing the arc of where my own CTL has gone this year, I was actually inspired to buy even more winter stuff because, like, I'm going to do this next winter right. Um,
It's a
and
huge difference, man.
it is. So, as part of this collaboration you have with other coaches, you know, you say that they're kind of independent and do their own thing and have their own style and their own following, and of course keep most of the revenue too. But there is something that glues you all together. There's a
Yeah.
nexus, a hive mind. So tell me kind of about how that works from a practical perspective. Do you guys talk constantly all day as needed? Do you have regular calls, sessions, Zooms?
If we could get everybody on every week, that just doesn't realistically happen. So I would say probably every 2 to 3 weeks we have a call. We have a coaches chat in WhatsApp, and that's probably where most people hit each other up because it's just easier than all getting on the phone to discuss it. But there's always, and you also have the specific coach that you're going to go to. If there's something like my athlete's Zwifty and there's an issue, I'm going to hit up Patrick or Alex. If somebody's got a mountain bike question, you usually see Josh get tagged. Or, so everyone is sort of has their realm and is really good at something that we all sort of like to learn from that person for this type of topic. So I think the collaboration doesn't always come from every coach, but like, who is this most appropriate to, which also is similar to, I think we talked about how do athletes get assigned to coaches. If there's a mountain biker, I'm going to assign him. If he comes in through the website or whatever, just hits me up, and Josh has room, I think he'd be better fit with Josh. Or, if someone's out racing in Colorado where Landry's from, it only makes the most sense for him to go to Landry. So it's a very shared economy in that aspect. And we're all just trying to help each other win. I really want coaches to believe in themselves that they can make a living doing this and a comfortable one at that and be proud of what they're doing. So small tangent, but yeah.
But as far as the actual dynamic, and also, you'll have to excuse the tech and communications nerd in me, but like, I'm curious, well, why WhatsApp for the group chat as opposed to something like Slack?
Slack for a non-tech, I find Slack horrible. I've tried it on multiple occasions.
Not the only one.
Yeah, I hate Slack.
Okay.
In a big group, I don't think WhatsApp is appropriate. In a small group of 8, I think it's pretty good. And
yes, Slack is just going to have a lot more features for sharing files and inlining content. And of course, I'm also probably have a prejudice about this because we share a lot of code blocks and monospaced text in my profession, which you guys don't.
You got to remember too, there's only so much that athlete A comes up to me and says, "Hey, I got a race in 2 weeks. What do you think I should do?" That's what I call snapshot coaching. I have no idea who you are. I have no idea what you're good at. I have no idea what you've been doing. And your race is in 2 weeks. We're not going to be able to change anything. Take that nugget. If I have an issue with an athlete, I'm like, okay, how do I best sum up this athlete? What are the biggest bullet points that are applicable to this problem? And then as they dig in, sometimes it's like there's just so much backstory that you'd have to just call somebody. We're not going to be slacking about that. It would be typing a novel. And you just know every athlete is so different that collaboration on athletes, you can get some opinions, but sometimes it almost makes the water murkier. So it's like you go to the same coach about the same guy so they do have backstories. Like, hey, remember that guy I told you about a month and a half ago? Okay, this is happening now. Blah, 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 blah. And so it's more
siloed.
Yeah. I think that's better.
So it's not like this is the collective with the constant hive mind that's constantly doing a full n squared everyone to everyone communication graph.
Yeah, it'd be impossible. It would be impossible. Every athlete is so different, and that's what the best thing about growing your coaching relationship with someone. You learn so much about them and continue to learn about them, and it's just it's really hard to take a snapshot of that and get good advice about it, which is the downfall of like a forum. I love forums talking about riding, but it's like someone posts a question, it's like, okay, well, what about X, Y, and Z first? What are those inputs before we give you some suggestions? So kind of the same thing with the coaching collective, if we want to call it that.
Yeah, so it actually doesn't make sense to constantly traverse the whole graph. That makes sense. That you operating more as independent contractors and really just collaborating on a truly as needed basis.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. So let's talk about pricing for a minute, our favorite topic. So pricing is interesting, and you said earlier that serious athletes, come to you because they have the impression that you're offering a more premium product, and of course, part of that is signaled with the pricing. If you had more bargain basement pricing, you'd probably get less serious people. But the pricing does if you present yourself as a kind of a boutique coaching brand, the pricing almost has to match. Otherwise, people are going to say, "What's
boutique?"
Okay, not boutique. That's a bit of a term of art, I guess. But a premium coaching brand, then if the pricing doesn't match, people are going to be like, "What's the catch?" So the pricing does have to fundamentally match, and that's true of most things in business. But it gets me to the topic of pricing segmentation. And I mean, you might have to forgive me a little bit here. I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent because I find the topic of pricing segmentation and market segmentation absolutely fascinating. It's maybe not what most people lay awake and think about at night, but I do. I can definitely tell you I've laid awake at night and thought about market segmentation. And so the thing about market segmentation for the relatively uninitiated is, we're taught in kind of economics for peasants 101 in high school that the profit maximizing point for any for a business is simply charging the highest price at the highest quantity you demanded, right? But when you have some flexibility in how you're able to price, because you're not making 2% margin on cost of goods sold like a grocery store or something, then you're actually leaving money on the table with this formula, because you got some people that would be willing to pay higher and you're not charging them enough. And you've got some people who'd be willing to pay less and you could still make something from them, particularly since that base of the pyramid is usually larger. And then you have to kind of decide if it's worth it and do all these different calculations. But the bottom line is, in an economist's ideal allocation of resources pipe dream, you'd probably just go up to everybody and say, well, how much money do you have, and charge them accordingly. And obviously lots of other factors like how much they value the good or service, et cetera, et cetera. But the bottom line is you can't actually do that, because so you can't just charge everybody whatever they might be willing to pay, right? So instead you have to kind of you have to devise some means of giving people different buckets of value, different degrees of value, in order to charge them different prices, right? And I mean, sometimes people generally don't like being price discriminated. I mean, the airlines get away with it. Everybody on the plane paid a different price for the ticket, right? But for the most part, like for example, in the world of software, you usually have like a home or consumer version, a pro version, or an enterprise version. They all cost a little different. 99% of the time, it's the same code base, but you've got some features disabled. So you are giving somebody something different. And I think the thing that the puzzle piece that fascinates me the most about segmentation is really, how do you get the segments right? Because you can miscalculate this horribly. You got people who, let's say for the sake of argument, you've got a product, a piece of software that people are, through focus groups and survey monkey studies, whatever, you've decided that $200 a month is what they want to pay for it. That's the most that people are willing to pay, in the greatest number. But you got some people who are only willing to pay $99. And then you got some people who think it's so amazing that they'd be willing to pay $600 a month. They don't even care. They just think it's great. And so the question is how to reach those three segments, for example, in the world of software, right? So the problem then becomes, if you take the features that the enterprise class bigwig users want and you put them in the $200 version instead of the $600 version, you're targeting the wrong people, and they say, oh, I only have to pay $200. Sweet. So allocating the differentiation correctly is, I think, the hardest part of this puzzle intellectually. And so you've got a number of different pricing levels and tiers. And from what you've told me in the past, the primary differentiator is really just the amount of communication and involvement that you get from the coach. But tell me a little bit more about how you came to that conclusion, and just what other differentiators you might have in mind in the future, and where you stand on that.
Yeah, so I think it's definitely been a work in progress of figuring out, so I'm sure this is like a work in progress almost, because we have athletes amongst all levels. And when you first start, if you're a new coach listening, you can't imagine someone, at least I didn't imagine someone giving me $300 to coach them, because I started, as I said in the beginning, at $50.
Sure.
And so as you're feeling through things, you also have to calculate, like, hey, if I'm going to make this a business and I'm going to live off of this, I need to charge someone actually what I really, the amount of time I'm putting into this to helping them get faster and love riding. So, at one point I had like 30-minute phone calls with people. And the thing that I quickly realized, by the time you catch up with someone, like, hey, what's up? How you doing? Da-da-da. How's Sally? What's up? Da-da-da-da-da. And then you get into riding, there's no, like the call was not worth the 30 minutes of time for either person. And most people don't want to be on the phone for an hour. So that's when I started thinking more about Zooms. And then it was like, how many Zooms do we do? How often do you do the Zoom? And really the biggest thing is the higher level athlete, they're just more successful because you are working closer with a coach who can then get so much more input from you. And that's why, those are my favorite athletes to work with, because I've become the closest friends with them. I talk to them more often. I see them more often. It's like the person that comes into a restaurant every other day, they're a regular, and you just know them more. It's not a knock on someone who's a level 1 athlete. I just talk to them more often. And so, and then, how do you segment the price? I think it's really comes down to, there's, industry averages of, hey, these people charge this. Hey, these people charge that. And I just picked prices that I really thought was fair. And I put myself in the athlete's shoes. Hey, if I got this caliber coach to do this for me, am I cool with this price? And I'm good with all of them. And I spend a lot on coaching myself. So, I just kind of use that as a natural scale. And then also, this is more a tip for coaches that are starting out there. You have to stay true to that. And I mean, when you have a level 2 athlete that's hitting you up just way too much, I just politely tell them, hey, I would love to engage with you more. But to be fair to the people who pay me to do that, like I have to kind of throttle back the communication. It's not that I don't want to talk to you. It's just not fair to those that do that. And most of the time, people don't even realize they're crossing the line. They're like, man, I'm really sorry. Actually, I want that next level. It's so worth it to me. And so, it's just, as you're growing your business, make sure you feel like you're getting paid what you deserve. No, you're not worth $1,000 a minute. But there are coaches that reach out to me now and they say, hey, would you mind chatting with me about my coaching business? I'm happy to help them. More coaches, the better. Let's go. I'm not trying to knock anybody, take anybody's business. And the conversation always goes to athletes that are just eating up their time. And I said, you just have to have an honest conversation with this person. If they don't value you, then unfortunately it might not be a good relationship, and have to, help them find a new coach.
And the athlete may just not realize what all is involved on the back side.
And there's just some people that are like that, right? It's I never discount. Because it just comes back to valuing the time. The prices we have set, I find, are extremely fair for what you get. You're not more special than somebody else. Sorry, no discounts. Even if my mom came on, sorry.
Well, I still have to make a living. Yeah, one of the biggest epiphanies I had early on in the life of my business, because I'm a fairly narrow specialist, and one of the, like you, I kind of started out maybe not at the industry equivalent of a $50 level, but I started out charging quite little, and then what I gradually realized is not just that I could charge more, but that I was showing up at some nicer and nicer customers and charging these bargain basement rates, and every once in a while I'd lose a deal, or they just wonder what's wrong with this guy, and they just be scratching their head because everybody else is charging literally, in one case, twice as much. And I found that when I doubled my rates, I actually grew into the role they were expecting me to play much better. So that's a discovery process that you have to undergo. And like I said, the pricing has to match the image and has to match the substance. So speaking of that, there are coaches out there who offer one-on-one personalized coaching, but nevertheless seem to combine this with a lot of canned workouts and workout plans for sale on Training Peaks and the like. You don't seem too into that, which I wonder what's your take on that kind of approach?
So it's not an approach that I care to take on simply because, and there's a caveat to this also. It just never so it's putting out training calendars or templates for $29. You know, are we really helping athletes do that? And I know that if someone's going to buy it, you might as well supply it. I understand that's a term, a phrase. I just decided to try and go the route of I want to put out podcasts and blogs that have all this information and you just need to put it together yourself. And I understand some people don't want to do that. So someone should supply this $29 training plan. The one issue I do have with it is that then people realize you can make real money selling these. And I'm talking real money. And it became the FTP booster, the VO2 max, blah, 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 whatever the cool hit phrase is. And it's drag and drop as a few workouts. I just wish that someone would just, I get it. I mean, you're making money doing it.
Does it boost FTP?
It doesn't boost FTP most of the time. Well, here's the other thing too. If you get a new cyclist to buy it, whatever they do, as long as they're riding,
it's going to boost FTP.
They're going to boost. So it's a little misnomer. That being said, someone just messaged me today and said, wow, I never thought I'd seen EVOQ plan in the Training Peaks store. So I actually just posted, I don't know if we want to go down this NFT wormhole, but I want to create ways in Web3 where we can make stronger in real life relationships with athletes and those people that want to support us. And this really started stemming from the Florida group ride / camp that we did last year. That was an absolute blast with EVOQ athletes.
I was there.
You were there, and I can't wait for this year. And so what we're going to do is, a lot of people say, hey, what are your favorite workouts? What is this? And I always I'm not going to make a calendar of this because you need to know when to do the workouts. So Landry and I sat down and we started talking about the top 10 VO2 max workouts that we do. And we hit up the other coaches and said, hey, if you have a workout that you really love, send us, what is it? How do you execute it? When do you do it? And really, how should an athlete apply this to their training? So we made, I think it's 17 or 19 pages about VO2 max. Go learn about VO2 max. Then we made a guide of here are the 10 workouts. This is what we do. It's probably a 10-page PDF. Then I went into Training Peaks because then I said, well, the people like built workouts. And I get that. A lot of people use them indoors. They want them outdoors. They want to be cued, da-da-da. So I put in 10 workouts that are our top 10. And then below that, I put in a sample. Here's one of the myriad of ways that you would put this together. And I'm this is actually kind of a really good blog, but it's in PDFs and it's on Training Peaks. And then I'm going to make just an NFT, and it's more just considered a token. Let's take the word NFT out of it. And I posted it actually, I haven't posted this yet. I sent it to a lot of day one athletes, meaning people that supported us in the Discord and came on early, and I just airdropped it to them. I think I'll probably post it for $49 and say you get all of that for $49, and the token down the road, I might say, hey, I'm in North Carolina this weekend. Chris is gone, or maybe in 4 weeks he's gone. Who that has the VO2 max token wants to come climb a ton of mountains with me and do a drawing? Or, hey, we're at this race. Who's going out to dinner? We want to do something here. And,
you almost want to kind of gamify it a little bit.
Gamify it and create a riders fund and give away more. I think we've given away thousands of dollars of stuff, whether it's Lactigo, sunglasses, CBD products in the Discord, just by doing random drawings. I think it'd be really cool to have a fund that we're going to do. I still don't think I'm going to take money from these sales from the Training Peak store. I think I'd rather buy more stuff to give back to athletes and just continue to create really goodwill. So maybe not the best at keeping the money, but we're pretty good at making some of it. So, but I'd like to.
I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm not against it. I just think that there's not much value in it for athletes, especially with all the content out there. Why are you spending $70 on this booster? There's so much information out there. If you need a built workout, hit me up. I'll put one in your calendar for you.
Yeah. And of course, like you said, there's a certain type of relatively new cyclist that's probably most apt to consume that. and that person just probably making huge gains just from going to any kind of consistent or structured program
Which
at
I
all.
get. Well, if you're brand new, I wasn't ready to spend. Back then, I think coaching was, I think, 175. I got a coach on my second season. I was like, "Ooh, I like the sport. How do I get better?" And someone's like, "You need a coach." Changed everything.
Yeah, whereas it took me even 4 years to start writing with other people. So that does make me curious. How, in terms of the funnel from which the other coaches derive so much value, the marketing, how does it work? How do people find out about Evoke, as far as you've been able to tell?
Yeah, definitely podcast, definitely the blog. We're still super small in terms of that. So if anyone's listening, if you can share those episodes, it helps massively. I still love that people are like, there's always a YouTube comment, just found your channel, da da da. I'm like, wow, people on social media, right? You just got to keep putting stuff out there. We are still very small in the grand scheme of things, even though we're one of the bigger coaching groups by now. YouTube channel, and I'm learning things as I go. We were growing on YouTube, and then the blog was really blowing up. Then I went to YouTube, and then I went back more towards podcast. You really just have to be with all of them to help the algorithms go.
Well, certainly from an SEO perspective, it's hard to index videos and really put pointers into videos. I mean, yes, you can put keywords and descriptions around them. And
it's getting better though now. And now everyone wants chapters, so the chapters get indexed, and
yeah.
So and then word of mouth, just telling people, hey, if someone's looking for a coach, if they're looking for help, we're trying to help cyclists. I want Evoke. Evoke is evoke your best self. Find your best self through cycling. So I want people also to feel like, and when I'm not with Evoke, and hopefully it's still going, just that it's a group that is trying to help you find your best self through cycling. And that a lot of times starts with one question of like, hey, I need help with this. Hey, I need help with this. If you can't find the right answer online, hit us up. It's 8 people with a lot of experience, and we don't have all the answers, but hopefully if we don't have an answer, we can point you in a direction to help somebody else. And
Yeah,
and so it's just creating a conversation about cycling. That's really, it's as simple as that. And
for sure. And I know that you made it when in one of the local ride Strava groups a while back, I saw Evoke blog content being circulated entirely organically by people who had no idea who you were otherwise. That's when I knew you made it.
I don't know if we made it. I honestly feel like we're really just starting, because it's just a lot of people don't know who we are, and I'm sure a lot of people see a video and like, who the hell is this guy?
Sure.
And we post a lot of stuff. I will say there's a very well-known podcast, and this guy, I got an email from him, and he said, hey, I'm thinking about putting out this newsletter to coaches, da 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 da. And I was like, how the hell did this guy find how does he know who I am? And so I messaged him like, yo, well, how did you find Evoke? And he goes, you have a ridiculous amount of content on the internet. What are you talking about? And I laughed, and he was like, no, seriously, like you're everywhere. And that felt really good.
I think even during the time I've been following you, that's changed, because it really did have some humble beginnings in like 18, 19. But I think by the time you and I connected, it no longer felt that way, just in terms of like, it's an impression.
Man,
and I know it's relative, but
yeah, it's real. And that's the thing. I look, and that's one thing I really look up to the other guys that are leaps and bounds and years ahead of us. And it sounds like we're no martyrs. We're trying to run a business. We're definitely trying to make money doing this. But I want someone to see Evoke at a race or at an event and be like, those people are just trying to help people get faster. Like, that's a cool group of people who clearly are passionate about cycling. Back to the how do we find coaches? You can tell pretty quick if someone's living and eating and breathing this sport, or if they're just kind of like, maybe this is my next gig. Maybe I should be a coach,
Yeah.
I just love talking about riding. I love talking about trying to get better. And there's no coach has every answer, and every coach is good at different things. That one of the best, not the best podcast, but something that was a salient moment for me was it was not Hunter Allen. I think it was Dr. Andy Coggan talking about coaches. And he's like, listen, everyone's not going to be a PhD. Everyone's not a good racer. Everyone isn't a good cheerleader. Everyone isn't super organized and can run a business. And he talked about all these different things that coaches can be, and that you're going to be a handful of them, and like be around other people that are good at the other stuff, and just try to be the best coach you can be. And that's, that's what I think in this era, there's a lot of like, where's the study from? And where's this? There's always like, which I think is great. Don't get me wrong. I love the science, but there are some people that put out science stuff that have never raced. And it's like, okay, this guy's really good in the lab. He needs to translate that into a bike racer. And I'm going to put out stuff that I can learn about and I can understand. But there are plenty of coaches that are way smarter than me and that could run circles around me. And so I think as a coach, just make sure you know your lane and don't front on the internet about stuff. And it's, yeah. So we're just trying to keep growing. I want to have, we have over 100 athletes now, 8 coaches. And I think as long as we keep putting out good content that helps people, we'll have more coaches that want to be a part of it because they want to grow a business and become self-sufficient on their own. And yeah, it just feels good to be. I love the coaches calls. I love that group of people. So
out of curiosity, are those roughly 100 athletes approximately equally distributed? And that's really a proxy for a different question, which is, are all the coaches more or less full-time?
No, they're not all equally distributed because to your second point, everyone doesn't want the same amount of athletes. I think I would have at the most people I've ever coached was over 30, which to me was too much. I've lowered that number down. I'm going to stay
tired just even thinking about it.
I'm going to stay in the 20 to 25. And see, that's when content went awry. Dude, I would like things. I don't want to say we were blowing up because I don't even think we haven't blown up yet. But there were like new athletes coming in. And I was like, wait, who's this person? Who's this person? Da, da, da. Okay, and this person's going to this person. And it was actually a great thing to help me get even more organized. But the
cognitive workload was just,
it was just, I was like, I'm not going to be a good coach. And something like, that's the number one thing, like sometimes people email me on a Monday morning and I don't get back. If they're not an athlete of mine and you're like random person, I'm going to hit you back. But if you have a legit question, I'll just tell them, hey, I need some time with this because I have all these athletes I want to take care of. So no, it depends on who wants how many athletes and who has room for athletes. And that's why we're always looking for good coaches, because once you don't really want to be maxed out, or you can't take on that great next athlete that comes and wants some help. And so I feel like I missed a part of that question, or did I not?
No, I don't know. I think you got it. So in marketing, of course, we talk about marketing, then we talk about conversion, and this maybe is getting into the weeds a little bit, but when you have all these channels through which people come to EVOQ, but of those channels, do you find that there's a high correlation between coming in via a particular vector and converting to a paid athlete?
So this is definitely a weakness of ours, in that, people that run a business, they know marketing is, there are people that run marketing agencies, and we honestly would need one of those from, we have people that do some off-site stuff, whether it's in terms of content creation, I'm trying to get going with them, or helping us with analytics on blogs and the like. With so many channels of things coming in, I put out content, but I could tell you some stats like, 3,000 people a week come to the website, 80%, give or take, most is from organic search. People look up stuff on Google and find us.
Really? It's not backlinks from other blogs.
We don't have that many backlinks. We need more backlinks.
Well, for context, you might, but on the other hand, it means that people are finding you through organic search. It means that they're motivated, that they're live.
Dude, search. Organic search. We're good.
Organic search is the purest form of flattery,
which is why Google likes us. The algorithm definitely likes that people find us from these long tail and kind of obscure cycling keywords. Mm-hmm. Our podcast is super small. Even though people listen to it, we have maybe now I think it's 800 an episode of unique users is what Anchor tells me. That's still less than 200,000 downloads since I've been doing it nonstop for maybe a year. I was on and off for a little bit. Someone like a Dylan Johnson gets that in a video. So we're
Yeah,
tiny.
but 80% organic search, dude, that's gold.
It's
Very few people can claim that. I mean, 70% of my hits are not organic at
Well,
all.
I think
That's
I think that's the good. I mean, even if YouTube, we're tiny, but it's like every month, 130,000 people are seeing EVOQ, and so it's like they need to see it
wow.
7 times maybe before they watch the video, and so a lot of this is me doing it. So I'm not a
Well,
marketer. I don't.
I was gonna
Yeah,
say, for considering it's all bootstrapped by basically more, I know other things are coming online, but more or less one guy. Those are really impressive stats, actually,
it's
in
just
the
been
web
trying to be
economy.
consistent and trying to be reading up on what are the best trends and what are the best ways to do this. But I would say if you could tell, and then we started to track in the power file analysis, hey, where did you hear from us? Have I aggregated all those statistics and really dug into them? No, but it's weird. The podcast is way more popular than I thought it would be. And I think there's just less cycling podcasts and people like the sort of,
Well,
I kind of think it's a unique nature. It's not always just
well,
data and stuff.
and let me also offer just a perspective on like the marketing and analytics side of this. There are there are really the marketing analytics stuff and the stuff that marketing agencies can do. For the most part, that's stuff that works at a very, very large scale. If you're pushing something that has widespread consumer appeal, or if you're like selling something on Amazon or whatever, if you're still catering to a niche, and there's the limited addressable market here in the grand scheme of things. Now it's pretty big. It's quite big. It's very big compared to what I do. There's like 10 people in all of Atlanta who understand what I do, and I can't take out a billboard, But I'm really jealous of the fact that you've got the addressable market that you do. For me, I'm in the B2B world. That's a lot more like your medical device distributorship, where there's only like really a couple hundred people and maybe a couple thousand in North America that you need to know, and that's like the whole thing. That's a different set of marketing challenges. It's easier because you know where to go and where to find them. It's harder because that's the market size and that's all you got. But really, for niche content, I don't know. I mean, yes, you could get better at aggregating those statistics and inferring trends, but still the N is relatively low. So I think how much mileage you could get out of that might be a little bit. Just to kind of tie it all together, let me ask you a question, and it may be a little bit of a delicate question, but what do
Oh,
you enjoy or not enjoy about athletes that are either harder or easier to coach? What makes an athlete, I guess, easier or more fun to coach for you? And I don't mean to say there's any athlete you hate coaching. Presumably you wouldn't be doing it, but just do's and don'ts. What's a more coachable athlete? What are the good parts of the job and maybe the not so good parts?
that's interesting. I think, well, the good parts and not good parts might be separated out from the actual athletes themselves. There's some, you just did a huge training block and you wake up and you're like, God, I have so many power files to look through. And you don't want to just be blase, like, good job, and move on. Now, granted, I looked through some athlete stuff during a power file analysis. I'm like, when does the coach communicate with them? I comment on almost every ride, even recovery rides. I look to make sure they're actually doing recovery. I think that's important. I don't like when someone's not commenting on stuff like that. That communication is so crucial. So there's that aspect to it, but more towards the athletes, the thing that I love, the athletes I love working with the most are the ones that are just excited about what they're doing. They love riding, they love training, and they love the challenge of getting better. A lot of people assume that because they ride 10 hours a week, they're going to become extremely good. And that is not always the case because God gives us some, there's some max to your physical capabilities. The great thing about endurance sports is, though, the more you do it and the more consistent you are, you most likely are going to become a better athlete at this sport. It's not like if you have a really bad jump shot, you can work on it. You can't dunk though. If you can't jump, yeah, you can do strength shoes. There's ways to jump higher, but there's a limit in certain ways. Of course, there's a limit in cycling as well, but you can usually find a niche of being good at something in this sport. And that's one thing that I find really cool about endurance sports. It goes without saying if you're an athlete that thinks we are at your beck and call because you love training, I'm obsessed with cycling, and I still give my coaches the breathing room they deserve. And sure, if I'm paying someone $500 a month and I shoot them a text, I do expect a response within 24 hours. I also understand that they have a life, and I might text them and they just left for the ride and they just came home and they got in an argument with somebody, and it's like there's no time to be dealing with my training problem, and they go to bed and they wake up and then they reply back. That happens sometimes. So I think people that are nice and respectful, and this goes back to the pain thing, like, you know, do your athletes respect you as your partner in trying to help them get better? It's and the thing I love is you get a lot of different personalities. I'm coaching CEOs. I'm coaching young people trying to hopefully go pro. I'm coaching doctors. You get everything, and that's the cool thing. I mean, it's especially coming from before my work where I was only dealing with surgeons and only dealing with nurses, and then kind of dealing with purchasing people. There were like specific buckets of personality types and their jobs. This, you get everybody, and I think that's really cool. And then there's also, I guess, the last point to it: help us help you. Deliver, just as we say, like WKO or Golden Cheetah. What you input is what we input into the program determines what output comes out. Meaning, the more information we can give to a program, the more information and more accurate information we get back.
Garbage in, garbage out, as they say.
Yeah. So that's my beef with AI. Not really my beef. I can't wait till AI is there. We're just so far away because we can't input enough stuff yet to get really good recommendations back. Same thing for an athlete. There are some people, and I'll politely and delicately point this out to somebody. They go on an endurance ride, and I get, sorry if there's people getting rowdy here. If they go on an endurance ride, tell me about it. I probably don't need a 3-page summary on the endurance ride.
Oh, that hurts. Oh,
yeah. So, and I politely just say, hey, tell me the biggest points that are really beneficial to me understanding you and your life situation and you as the cyclist training, because I don't want it to be like, just tell me about the bike ride, damn it. Because there's more to that. You might go out on a workout and it's like, hey, man, I just got in a fight with my boyfriend and I'm just down and I just decided to go for endurance, the right, blah, 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 and tell me that. But some people, it's like, it gets extremely verbose and it's like, that's okay. I want you to maybe log that for yourself if that's a good way for you to unwind from the ride or from the workout. But let's also be realistic in that I have to read all of that and I have to process all of that and I have to I want to comment back on it. And then I'm looking at the file. There's only so much time I can allocate to Joey. So use that time wisely, you know? And now, of course, that goes to tiers. The more people pay me, the more flexibility I would have with that. And that's really why I lean more towards coaching higher level athletes that want to invest more in themselves, because I can give people more of my time. And so that's really always how I've based my business in medical device sales. I was more skewed to selling higher ticket implants and working with fewer surgeons than trying to work with 30 surgeons. That's also your Achilles heel. Somebody leaves, it's like, oh, damn, that's like a lot of money going out the door. But it's always been, I want to be able to offer the best possible service that I can give somebody. And we just have to be realistic with the time constraints that you're one human being, you're one coach. So I always try to bullet point things for my coaches. Like, here's the workout. Here's how I'm feeling. Maybe I should have changed this. But what does he really need to know about me? He doesn't need to know that, like, it's sunny out. And
yeah, well, those boundaries can be a little bit hard to draw, I suspect, precisely because you said the coaching relationship isn't just about the data or just about the bike ride. It's somebody, you know, on your team who's rooting for you, and the encouragement and the mentorship is part of that. But at the same time, they can't be your full-time therapist.
And
so
you said, well said, and because that's the thing, I don't want to make it sound like I don't want to hear, but we have to be realistic. And that's, man, I'll ask coaches when they say, hey, I'm just having, and these are when people like hit me up from outside of EVOQ. How do you spend time with someone? I said, send me like an email exchange that you have. And it's like, dude, you're right. You're blasting out like massive long emails. How did you even type all this in a day? They're like, I spent all day doing it. I said, so how are you going to grow a business that way? You need to have a realistic conversation with this athlete. Like, hey, man, I can't sit behind a computer and just email you all day. It's just not possible.
I think a lot of athletes might unconsciously assume that's what you do, not through any fault of their own, really, but just because they wouldn't know that you also have all this other stuff going on. They don't really think about it.
You know, I'd ask people, any job that we've all ever gotten, from our first job in high school or middle school or whatever, you look at what the tasks are to do, and then you get in the job and you're like, whoa, there's so many other little things I have to do. Like, you know, when I worked at the sub shop, okay, didn't even realize people were doing dishes. Fill up all the bowls with the food, chop up all the food, get all the meats. You have to, you know, see.
Yeah, it turns out actually making the sub for people is like 10% of it.
Bingo! It's like, are the shelves stocked out there? Da-da-da. I was like, wow, I thought we were just gonna be like throwing together some subs. Didn't realize we were running a business for a guy. So
oh yeah, yeah. Software code projects are like that too. People think, oh, you just code it up real quick. Well, first of all, it could be millions of lines of code, but second of all, that's maybe like 20% of it, and the rest of it is testing and product management and product market fit, this, that.
Here's the biggest thing: communicate. Tell your coach, yo, and I've said this to coaches before, hey, are you into this right now? Because I kind of feel like you're distracted, or, you know, just as I can sense when something's not going right with an athlete, their comments change. When Sally goes out for a ride, she usually writes 2 paragraphs and she just like felt good. Something's kind of amiss. Or if I'm traveling to races and it's just a super busy whatever weekend or blah, 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 and I'm trying to go through power files, I might want to try and get through the people I have to get through because they have a race coming up in 3 days and the comments are a little bit shorter. I have zero problem with an athlete emailing me like, yo, man, did you like see that or this? Like, I kind of felt like you might have been in a rush, blah, blah, blah. And let's talk about it. Communication is so key. And usually, and that's also on the coach. Sometimes if I'm going to be gone, and like when I went to Ecuador, it was like, I put a big note and emailed people, yo, I'm going to be gone. I'm still available. I got to figure out the Wi-Fi situation. Like, there might be some hit or miss. It might not be normal communication. And sometimes athletes confuse, you know, I'm pretty regimented. And so like, if I get off my regimen and someone's like, it's Saturday, you didn't look at my file from yesterday yet. It's like, okay, hold on. Take a deep breath. I haven't had a chance to be behind a computer. I didn't miss it. And so,
nowhere does it say I'm going to look at it every Saturday on the dot.
Exactly. But I don't mind those questions. I'm a very open book. And so I think for any new coaches listening, you just have to try to adapt your style to the athlete's style. Meet in the middle. Is it fair for both of us? Because at the end of the day, I'm just trying to help you. I'm trying to help you get faster. If you don't feel like you're getting something from me, say something. Let's talk about it. Like, because that's the same thing. Every athlete's different. Every athlete needs a little bit of different stuff. Somebody wants more analysis. Somebody wants more rah-rah, you can do it. And as a coach, that's part of your job, figuring out how do you make them confident on the start line. I just talked to an athlete today about this. Do we do this 100-mile race or this 50-mile race? And he was a little nervous that doing this last 100-mile race, he was fatigued like a week later, and he was thinking about this other race coming up, and they're butting heads. Long story short, I'm like, the fact that you were even in this other training ride thinking about that you kind of might be fatigued, I don't want you feeling that way on race day. Do the 50-mile, be totally recovered so that you're on that start line and in the race like, I'm going to crush this thing. So helping the athlete be confident is so crucial. So crucial.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it really just comes down to good communication flow and having some empathy and some ability to put yourself in the other's shoes and thinking about it less as humans and not just transactionally is kind of what I'm getting from this. And that makes a lot of sense. Well, I think that's probably a good place on which to wrap things up here.
Cool, man. Thanks, Alex. I appreciate you reaching out on this topic. It's a good one. And maybe we do another one down the road as there's more coaches and more questions. And I do actually think too, I might do like a how to help coaches start a business series of join EVOQ,
obviously.
Join EVOQ. I mean, it's so much better being with a group. than being on your own because of the support that you get from the other coaches and just the platforms and having everything set up and you're ready to go coach. You don't have to do all the business side of stuff.
Well, not to mention leveraging the brand and the funnel.
And you know, as a new coach, you're not going to be able to charge as much, and you just have to start way behind. So it's like find mentors in the space that are willing to help you speed it up. But that's a whole other podcast in itself.
For sure. For sure. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Cut.